Hi guys, so I'm going to be breaking down our reading for this week so that it can help you out a little bit. So I'm going to jump right into our first excerpt from George W. Bush. So the background information tells us once again, in 2001, President Bush banned government funding for research on stem cells obtained from human embryos. He believed the research was destroying human lives. In July 2006, Congress passed the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act, a bill that would restore funding to this type of research. Bush was faced with the choice to reverse his earlier position and sign the bill into law, or to maintain his opposition and reject the bill. In the following excerpt, Bush explains his decision. So he goes on to say, 5.5 years into the presidency, I had yet to veto a piece of legislation. I had worked closely with our congressional majorities to pass bills I could accept. But as the stem cell bill was working its way through Congress, I had made it clear I would veto it. When it reached my desk, I did. So when George Bush was president, he had never vetoed anything in office. However, he says that he knew when this bill reached his desk, the one on stem cell research, he would veto it. It was hit with all sorts of labels. I was hit with all sorts of labels, stubborn being one of the most polite. But I would not change my position. If I abandoned my principles on an issue like stem cell research, how could I maintain my credibility on anything else? I thought a lot about how to send the right signal about the veto. I wanted a vivid way to show that my position was grounded in my reverence for life, not any aversion to science. When Carl Zinmeister, my domestic policy advisor, suggested inviting a group of snowflake babies to the White House, I thought the idea was perfect. Each had come from a frozen embryo that, rather than being destroyed for research, was implanted in an adoptive mother. So many people were upset with Bush's decision. Bush felt that he could not change his values because if he did, then he could never be trusted again. Bush stood by his opinion no matter what. So he's talking about that he's inviting a bunch of kids to the White House who they were born through these embryos that could have gone to research, but instead they were given to adoptive mothers. I gave my veto speech in the East Room with 24 excited children and their parents on stage. One of the little wigglers was 14-month-old Trey Jones. He started life as an embryo fertilized by Dave and Heather Wright of Macomb, Michigan. The couple had undergone in vitro fertilization treatment, which helped them bring 3 beautiful children into the world. They gave permission for the remaining frozen embryos to be adopted instead of being destroyed for research. Okay. So Bush talks about his veto speech that was given with children born of embryos not given the science. Bush did not want the embryos to be used for science because they could turn into children, like the kids he describes being adopted here. In Cypress, Texas, JJ and Tracy Jones were praying for a child. Through Nightlife Christian Adoptions, they were paired with the Wright family embryos. The result was the smiling blonde-haired boy named Trey, whom I held in my arms at the White House. Thanks to the miracle of science and the compassion of 2 families, Trey had a loving home and a hopeful life ahead of him. A few weeks after the event, I received a touching letter from J.J. Jones. He described the pain of infertility and how blessed he and Tracy felt to have their precious Trey, who some describe as a leftover destined to be either destroyed or used for research. He also informed me that Trey would soon have a sibling, the product of another frozen embryo he and Tracy had adopted. So Bush is using these children as an example of why he vetoed the bill. He believes that all these embryos that would have been studied in a lab deserved the chance to become children. Congress' response to my veto was not so warm. The Democratic sponsor of the bill erupted with a statement claiming that the veto was based on cynical political gain. It was hard to see how, since most polls showed my stem cell stance was not popular. As punishment for my veto, Democrats refused to pass legislation supporting research into alternative sources of stem cells. The message was that if they couldn't fund stem cell research that destroyed embryos, they would prefer to fund none at all. So much for their passionate desire to see new cures. So many people were upset with Bush's decision, but he didn't do it for political reasons. Bush claims most people opposed his decision, even though he made it because he just felt like he could not compromise his personal beliefs. After the veto, Democrats blocked any attempts at finding alternatives to using embryos for stem cell research. When the Democrats won control of the House and Senate, they decided to make another run at overturning my policy. Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced that it was one of her top priorities. They sent me another bill in June 2007. I sent it back again with my veto. Thanks to the courage of many Republicans on Capitol Hill, the veto held. So the Democrats submitted another bill in 2007, but Bush vetoed it again. 5 months later, Americans awoke to an unexpected headline on the front page of the New York Times. Scientists bypass need for embryo to get stem cells. The article described how two teams of researchers, one in Wisconsin and one in Japan, had reprogrammed an adult skin cell to behave like an embryonic stem cell. By adding just 4 genes to the adult cell, scientists were able to replicate the medical promise of embryonic stem cells without moral controversy. So Bush goes on to talk about how he is very happy that he stood by his decision because they did find a way to reprogram these skin cells to behave like embryonic stem cells. So the discovery, we're here at 53, the discovery reverberated through the scientific community. Fervent advocates of embryonic stem cell research hailed the breakthrough as a spectacular advance and ethically uncomplicated. Ian Wilmot, the Scottish scientist who cloned Dolly the sheep, announced that he would no longer pursue the cloning of human embryos, but would instead use this new technique. I was thrilled by the news. This was the scientific breakthrough that I had hoped for when I had made my announcement in 2001. Charles Krauthammer, and one of the most insightful columnists in America and respectful critic of my stem cell decision in 2001, wrote, "The verdict is clear. Rarely has a president so vilified for a moral stance been so thoroughly vindicated." In the years to come, our nation will face more dilemmas about bioethics, from cloning to genetic engineering. History will judge the character of our country in large part by the way we answer these challenges to human dignity. I have faith, as I did when I announced my stem cell decision in 2001, that science and ethics can coexist. With thoughtful policy, we can usher in the new cures that Nancy Reagan hoped for without moving toward the world foreseen by Aldous Huxley. So Bush goes on to explain that he believes science and human ethics can exist together. And that's all about why he made his decision. So we're going to jump now to Obama's speech on overturning that decision that Bush made. So they give us some background information once again, but it says, less than 2 years after Bush's 2007 veto, President Obama issued an executive order, an instruction to agencies or officials that report to the executive branch of the government, reversing the government's position on embryonic stem cell research. Obama made this speech explaining his decision. Today, with the executive order that I'm about to sign, we will bring the change that so many scientists and researchers, doctors and innovators, patients and loved ones have hoped for and fought for these past 8 years. We will lift the ban on federal funding for promising embryonic stem cell research. We will vigorously support scientists who pursue this research, and we will aim for America to lead the world in the discoveries it one day may yield. So Obama signed an executive order that will allow the government to fund stem cell research again. He believes that we should support scientists and pursue this research. At this moment, the full promise of the stem cell research remains unknown, and it should not be overstated. But scientists believe these tiny cells may have the potential to help us understand and possibly cure some of our most devastating diseases and conditions. To regenerate a severed spinal cord and lift someone from a wheelchair, to spur insulin production and spare a child from a lifetime of needles, to treat Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease, and others that affect millions of Americans and the people who love them. So one of the reasons that Obama is claiming he is doing this is because scientists believe they can use the research to help us understand and cure deadly diseases. So that's why he supports it. But in recent years, when it comes to stem cell research, rather than furthering discovery, our government has forced what I believe is a false choice between sound science and moral values. In this case, I believe the two are not inconsistent. As a person of faith, I believe we are called to care for each other and work to ease human suffering. I believe we have been given the capacity and will to pursue this research and the humanity and conscience to do so responsibly. It is a difficult and delicate balance. Many thoughtful and decent people are conflicted about or strongly opposed to this research. I understand their concerns, and we must respect their point of view. So Obama believes that we do not have to make a choice between science and moral values. Both can exist in his opinion. Obama explains he is a person of faith. He believes that we should do what we can to prevent human suffering. He also adds that he respects that not everyone agrees with him, but that this is what he thinks is needed to move forward. All right, we're at 23 now. But after much discussion, debate, and reflection, the proper course has become clear. The majority of Americans from across the political spectrum and of all backgrounds and beliefs have come to a consensus that we should pursue this research, that the potential it offers is great, and with proper guidelines and strict oversight, the perils can be avoided. So Obama goes on to address the fact that many people across different backgrounds also support this research because it offers so many options for the United States. Ultimately, I cannot guarantee that we will find the treatments and cures we seek. No president can promise that. But I can promise that we will seek them actively, responsibly, and with the urgency required to make up for lost ground. Not just by opening up this new frontier of research today, but by supporting promising research of all kinds, including groundbreaking work to convert ordinary human cells into ones that resemble embryonic stem cells. I can also promise that we will never undertake this research lightly. We will support it only when it is both scientifically worthy and responsibly conducted. We will develop strict guidelines which we will rigorously enforce because we cannot ever tolerate misuse or abuse. And we will ensure that our government never opens the door to the use of cloning for human reproduction. It is dangerous, profoundly wrong, and has no place in our society or any society. So Obama goes on to explain that this research will be done responsibly. The research must be regulated so that it does not get taken advantage of. So he's just basically saying, like, we're not just saying scientists go free and do some weird stuff, but everything's going to be structured and regulated to prevent it from getting out of hand. So Obama also states that cloning will never be allowed under these mandates. So he's saying this research will never be used for cloning because cloning is wrong. All right. 40, we're almost done. There is no finish line in the work of science. The race is always with us. The urgent work of giving substance to hope and answering those many bedside prayers, of seeking a day when words like terminal and incurable are finally retired from our vocabulary. Today, using every resource at our disposal with renewed determination to lead the world in the discoveries of this new century, we rededicate ourselves to this work. Thank you, God bless, and may God bless America. So Obama goes on to say that science is always a race, right? We're always competing with others, and it's never going to stop. And he hopes that through this, we can one day have a world where the words terminal or incurable diseases no longer exist. So he gives all the reasons why he made his decision. And as we discussed earlier, Bush gave his reasons for his decisions. So just remember, for this assignment, we're not asking you to pick a side on who you agree with more. We just want you to evaluate their arguments. All right, so I hope this helps break down what they were talking about and makes it a lot easier for you.